Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December meeting of the Long Island Committee. Do we have any public speakers? Okay. Mr. Bowden?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I owe you a small apology. The last time I was here, I said Metro-North didn't have train whistles on their line. They do, and in fact, they are louder. The new ones are louder than the old ones. But the wrong question was asked. The question is, why do you blow the train whistle? 100 years ago, there were no gates. There were no public address systems on the platform. And the only way that somebody knew a train was coming down the track is you blew the whistle. Would you please stop? If you want to warn the people on the platform, you have a public address system because you can't hear the train whistle a half a mile down the road except the people who live next to the train. So if you want to warn the people on the train platform, use the public address system. If you want to warn the people at the crossing, then put a speaker up near the crossing. 100 years we've been doing it. How do you stop it? Yesterday I downloaded the committee reports for Metro-North and for bridges and tunnels and capital construction. I missed this one. Chairman came in and said, after all of these years, we're going to stop printing these reports and sending them out. Next month, you stop printing the reports. Stop the train whistles. The wrong question was asked. I came in this morning. It was raining, so I didn't want to stand on a platform and buy a ticket, so I went into the ticket agent. First time in a year. Gave him the card. He said, swipe it through the machine. I swiped it through the machine, which is really bad. And then he said, you want to sign this card? I said, why? I said, when I go outside and I swipe the card, I don't sign. You want me to sign inside? And everybody has to come here, has to sign them? I know they take them and they throw them in the garbage, because in Stanford last year I said, what do you do with these little cards? She says, we put them in the box and throw them out. So if you're putting them in the box and throwing them out, one, why are you printing them? Why are you asking somebody to sign them? And at the last meeting for Metro-North, they said, we're trying to make traffic faster in Grand Central. We put in new machines. Half the time is used for signing a ticket that's useless. How do you stop? I'm assuming Long Island Railroad does the same thing. I want to all wish you a very happy. By the way, this is a rehearsal for my board meeting next Wednesday. I'm going to go over the same information.
Thank you. Alina, do you want to answer the question about the train whistles?
I do think it's important that we address the notion that horn whistles are regulated by federal law and that we have to remain in compliance with federal law. We did have one rule on our books which required a horn sounding that was in fact not covered by federal law, and we eliminated that one to bring our own rules fully in compliance with federal regulation. We also filed with the Federal Railway Administration 2 petitions for waivers on when you have to sound horns. One was accepted and one was rejected. The one that was rejected would have allowed us to lower the decibel of the horns, but the FRA rejected that one. The one that was accepted did allow us to reduce the number of horn soundings at grade crossings. So we continue to move aggressively on a horn mitigation strategy, including expending funds to better direct the sound of the horn down the track so that it doesn't reverberate in different areas. So we are focused on a noise abatement program, but we have to remain in compliance with federal law.
Thank you, Helena, for the answer. There are no other public comments. Approval of the minutes of November 9th. Anybody have any corrections on the minutes?
No, I move them.
Second. All in favor? Okay. Long Island Bus. Joseph.
Good morning.
There are no changes to the work plan this month. Operations performance report, overall September bus service was strong. AM and PM weekday pullouts were both 100% for the month of October and 99.9% for the previous 12 months. Completed trips were also above 99% for the month of October and for the previous 12 months. MDBF was 3846, which was up an impressive 88% from October 2008. Fleet performance has improved as a result of best practices, new buses, and various consolidation of MTA bus operations using SPEAR maintenance management system and the good work of the team out in Long Island Bus. The 12-month MDBF is 19.5% higher than it was a year ago. In regard to safety performance, the 12-month collision rate has worsened slightly by 6.0% from last year, and it's basically due to the fact that we've changed the way we are recording our statistics. The 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents improved by 27.6% from the 2008 level. Bus ridership, though, continues to trend downward for the last 12 months. Total fixed route ridership decreased by 6.3% for October and was down 5.8% for the previous 12 months. Weekday ridership was down 3.8% for October and down 5.2% for the previous 12 months. Weekend ridership was also down 7.4% for the month of October and down 5.9% for the previous 12 months. However, paratransit ridership continues to increase. In comparison to 2008, it was up 3.6% for October and 5.4% for the previous 12 months. Fixed route fare box revenue was slightly lower than mid-year forecast by 0.2% for October, and year-to-date it is 1.6% below mid-year forecast. Paratransit fare box revenue was better than mid-year forecast by 23% for October, and it's 8.1% above forecast for year-to-date. Actual non-reimbursable expenses for the year-to-date through October for non-cash adjustments were lower than mid-year forecast by $4.1 million or 3.3%, and the other one is basically because of lower C&G expenses. We have no ratifications this month, but we have one non-competitive procurement and one competitive procurement for the committee's approval. The non-competitive procurement is a sole source service item to Lund Fire Products Company. It's to recharge our canisters for both the buses and on the fixed route buses and for the depots. The total amount of the contract is not to exceed $60,000. I request the committee's approval for this non-competitive procurement.
I move it.
Any questions on this procurement? All in favor? Aye.
Okay. The competitive item is a request to issue a modification to the existing Public Works contract awarded to Clean Energy for preventive maintenance and emergency repairs to the two compressed natural gas stations located at both Long Island bus depots. This action will extend the current contract terms to November 2010. The extension will ensure continuity of service while Long Island Bus and MTA Bus jointly finalize the technical spec to solicit and procure a joint contract for these requirements. We feel that when we get both companies together and put out a contract, we're going to wind up getting a better bid. The amount of the contract is not to exceed $367,803. I request the committee's approval for this competitive procurement.
Any kind of joint solicitation
It's always
good
helpful.
in my book.
Good, yeah, okay.
I move it.
Any questions on this one? All in favor? Aye.
Okay. We have one action item, the Long Island Bus 2010 proposed budget for the committee's approval for transmittal to the Finance Committee. As you know, MTA has identified a new budget shortfall which will be addressed at the Finance Committee meeting next week. For today, this committee needs to act on the proposed budget as presented in the staff summary. The 2010 proposed budget reflects a total fare box revenue of $42.5 million. It's 2% higher than the 2009 forecast. The fixed route ridership levels in the 2010 proposed budget are projected to be slightly lower than forecasted ridership levels as a result of the regional employment outlook. Long Island Bus's total 2010 non-reimbursable expenses are projected to be $134.1 million, which represents a $5.9 million increase over forecasted 2009 levels. It's primarily due to a CPI-driven increase in labor and fuel expenses. The 2010 budget also reflects the $1.4 million reduction in Nassau County's subsidy as incorporated in their 2010 budget. The chairman has reached out to both Nassau County executive and legislature to reverse this cut. If the cut is not restored, we will need to implement fixed route and non-ADA paratransit service-related reductions to offset this shortfall during 2010. The 2010 proposed budget does not reflect any reduction in the state transportation operating assistance funds to Long Island Bus beyond the $1.4 million cut in Nassau County subsidies. I'm requesting that the committee approve the 2010 proposed operating budget for transmittal to the Finance Committee.
Questions, comments? I mean, obviously, Finance Committee on Monday is going to be discussing the larger context of MTA finances upon which all of the operating agencies are affected, but at least for the moment, I think we all agree we'll just send it to Finance, and then whatever changes have to be made will be made in that context as part of those discussions, those larger discussions. We are still obviously disturbed by Nassau County's reluctance to fully fund their operating deficit. That is of great concern to this committee, and we would hope that Nassau County, the new county executive and the new county legislature, might have a different view of the bus system than the old one in that context.
They totally disrespect it.
Right. It is not a high priority for them, and that's unfortunate based upon the contract and our need for those revenues to keep service at a reasonable level. But with that, with those caveats, any object to just moving it to Finance for their discussion? So be it. Anything else, Joe?
No, that's it.
The only one question I had is: are we seeing in the reductions in customers? Are we seeing that on any specific route, or are they all across routes, or are they on any specific routes that go to individual places?
I would have to ask Norm, can we see along certain routes, we continue, we're looking at some changes for the winter pick, which goes into effect in January. There are still certain routes where there's a suppressed demand in Long Island that we need to address. Right now, the system is very healthy. The buses are really performing well, and we're trimming and we're pruning schedules. But Norm would have to adjust the. Are we seeing that across the board, Norm?
Generally, yes. It's across generally, yes. And what Joe said about desperately trying to take the routes that go along the cash cow corridors, we're trying to encourage that to the best we can. And we think we're going to bear some fruit, even with the economy situation. But, it takes time to evolve that. It's very easy to lose the rider. It's hard to get them back.
Right, which is why you don't want to lose them in the first place.
Right, correct.
Right, in that context. So we're not seeing them specifically just to the reduction just to employment centers or just to shopping. It's across the board, some percentage across the board.
Generally, that is correct.
Okay.
What we can do is give you a route-by-route decrease. Maybe for the year, we can take a look at it.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
That would be good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on Long Island Bus? If not, Helena?
Okay, again, good morning, Commissioners, and we are going to move to our finance report. Mark Young.
Yeah.
Good morning. The financial report, the regular financial report begins on page 5 of the document. I'll report on ridership, and Jerry Ring will report on the budget performance. For November, the month of November, the total ridership for the month was down 3.1%. That sounds bad. It's down again. I will note that it's the second lowest decline we've had during the year. So in one respect, it was the best month we've had since April. Commutation was down 7.4%, still seeing sharp declines there, largely due to the 2.9% drop in jobs in the New York City area, most of which affects our customers in their business sectors. Non-commutation was actually up 3% compared to November of 2008. That's obviously the highest growth we've had this year in any given month for non-commutation. I have to say that part of that was due to the Yankees winning the World Series. The ridership that day was up 135% for the parade compared to the year before. Also,
Didn't we decide that in the 2010 budget, we're putting in a parade. We just don't know who it's for.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, okay. That's what we get, Ira. What can I tell you?
Also, Thanksgiving Day, the weather was nice. Ridership that day for the parade was 12% over last year. So also that was a positive on the non-commutation side. So far, year to date, we've transported 15,100 riders to the Meadowlands for various events there. All of that contributes to the good numbers on non-commutation. So where does that leave us year to date? Year to date, we're down 4.8% total ridership through November. Commutation is down 6.3%. Non-commutation is down only 2.6%. And versus our final forecast, which you're considering today, we are down only 0.4%, which reflects the fact that we've budgeted most of this decline. That's it with the ridership. Let me turn it to Jerry for the budget numbers.
Good morning. Total revenue was favorable to forecast for the month of October by 2% and right on forecast year to date. However, driven by the ridership statistics that Mark Young has been reporting out, farebox revenue for October was under the forecast by $1.5 million or 3%. Year to date, farebox revenue is unfavorable to forecast by almost $5 million or 1%. With respect to our operating expenses, looking at the numbers before factoring in non-cash depreciation and other non-cash items, we are still running favorable to the mid-year forecast. Total expenses in October of $109 million are 5% favorable to forecast. Year to date, total expenses are 3% favorable to forecast. Labor expenses remain right on forecast for both the October and year to date. Shifting for a second to from dollars to headcount, which is on page 15 of the Long Island section of the report. At the end of October, the railroad had 6,791 active positions, which is slightly under the forecast of 6,848. So we have 57 vacant positions. At that point, however, the three major operating departments all had a vacancy rate of less than 1%. Excuse me. Wrapping up the financials, non-labor expenses remain favorable to forecast for October and year to date. Year to date, non-labor is $36 million favorable, or almost 12%. And this is driven by the timing of a few key items which were factored into the November year-end forecast. The resulting farebox ratio for October is 51%, or 4.6 points above the forecast. There are no major budget issues to report. Are there any questions?
Any questions on ridership or revenues? Okay.
All right, and we're going to go to Ray Kenny, our Senior VP of Ops, for an operations report.
Good morning, everyone, and I'll direct you to page 29 of our meeting book. And note that because the book was printed early, it only has the information up through November 22nd. The numbers that I'll quote are the numbers as of the end of the month, November 30th. The on-time performance, overall on-time performance for November finished at 95.28%, which is a new record. The AM off-peak for November was 96.76%, a new record. The PM peak was 94.05%. And the off-peak was 95.21, which is also a new record. As we're coming close to the end of the year, I have the year-to-date numbers through the end of November. Again, three records. The overall is 95.52. The AM is 96.15. The PM is 93.93, which is second best. And the off-peak is 95.69. During the month of November, we had 8 100% rush hours, 6 in the morning, 2 in the p.m. That's a total of 74 for the year versus a record of 77 set in 1993. The a.m. car availability was met each morning, and the MBDF, mean distance between failures, this lags a month. This is October 2009. We set a record of overall MBDF of 184,696. And also the MBDF goal was exceeded for each fleet.
I think we broke a record last month, too, or 2 months ago, I remember.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
And so you're breaking your record. Your record's
Every month they're breaking the record again.
Break the record again. The major events all related to the slip slide. We are pretty much, hopefully, at the end of this year's cycle of that. we had more bad adhesion days in terms of the conditions, the weather conditions, and only slightly more delays than last year, 242 versus 222.
So all of the, one would assume from that context that the variety of activities the railroad implemented to reduce the slip slide activities worked.
Yes.
Because we had more days but less incidents.
More days, less incidents, no instances of damage to wheels, things of that nature.
None of the brake issues that we had a number of years ago since we've implemented all the new programs.
Yes, and has not affected car availability.
That's great. That's great. Because those would have been seen in the mean distance numbers.
And also in the car availability number and performance.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And as Mark pointed out, we had two major programs, the Thanksgiving, which, as he mentioned, we had 12% more ridership than last year, and we carried like 4.5 times what we would do on a normal holiday in a pretty concentrated period for the parade. And the Yankee Parade, which Mark mentioned the numbers as well. And that was done with the assistance of MTA Police, both in terms of the planning of the events and the actual execution, and looking back to see what we can improve. That concludes my report. I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ray? Okay. Next.
Okay, we're going to the police report, and we have Lieutenant King with us this morning.
Good morning, Helena. To stay on the note with Ray brought up before, we did have extra police details for the Yankee Day Parade, Thanksgiving Day Eve, Thanksgiving Day Parade, and Black Friday Shopping Day. Although there was large crowds, we had no notable increase in police activity or notable events for any of those days. Change to page 46A, the crime stats for the Long Island Railroad. Major felonies were down 19% in November, although major felonies are slightly up for the year, 7%. Violent felonies, robberies, are down by 17% year-to-date, and grand larcenies are up by 15%. We will also have extra police coverage for our next major holiday, which will be New Year's Eve.
Which I also understand is alcohol-free.
Yes, it will be.
Just a point.
Well, and
Couldn't resist.
let me just report Thanksgiving Eve is alcohol-free on Long Island Railroad as well, and we think that that's helped our policing strategy considerably.
Yes, I have no doubts.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go to
Thank you.
thanks, capital program with Kevin Tomlinson.
Good morning. Our capital program highlights are found on page 47 and include 2 milestones for the month of November. We achieved beneficial use of 2 critical infrastructure projects. The first, Amont Drainage, the culvert in Syosset, and second, the replacement of the 100-year-old Shore Road Bridge on our Oyster Bay branch. The standard project updates on the Central Islip Police Facility, Atlantic Avenue Viaduct, East Side Access, Atlantic Terminal, and the mainline corridor improvements are found on page 48. I would like to highlight that our Atlantic Avenue Viaduct has completed the replacement of all 87 spans for Phase 1, and we have already begun span replacement for Phase 2. We're into our second week this weekend coming up. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and have a nice holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quickly, I wanted to add on the Atlantic Viaduct, those are the ERA funds as we go into Phase 2, and we're delighted to have that funding available. And, of course, we have one last segment on the Atlantic Viaduct, so if any additional ERA funds become available, there's been certainly some talk in Washington. We would be seeking to complete that project if we could. I did want to mention, again, the Shore Road Bridge was a really outstanding effort by employees using 2 weekends. We want to thank our Oyster Bay branch customers on weekends, as well as local residents who had to go through detours. It was a very effective program and done right on time and within a very tight schedule. With regard to the MTA Police Facility in Central Islip, I do want to note that we've had some issues with the contractor's recovery plan. That's not as on schedule as we would like to see. There's been some design issues, and Kevin's team has really added additional focus out there with more consistent, and frequent meetings with the contractor to make sure we try to get it back in the schedule we want. That's a facility that our police units look forward to getting into, and we, of course, want to see completed. One other note is on the Atlantic Avenue Terminal. We're coming into closure on that beautiful facility. That's been a really wonderful rehabilitation. Really, it looks brand new, and we look forward to that one getting to completion. With that, we're going to turn to an information item that we have, and that is on page 51 in the book. And that is an item that was led by Metro North. It is a joint procurement effort involving Metro North, Long Island Railroad, Capital Construction, and headquarters. And we move forward to obtain MTA Board approval to pre-qualify 81 consultants who perform various personal service contracts in design, engineering, supervision, inspection services, and miscellaneous professional services in conjunction with the capital program. Of course, we'd like to have an approved capital program, but we're hoping that will come. And it also services the needs of various operating divisions. The pre-qualification is for the 5-year period. It involves 81 consultants in various categories of work. We've listed all of those so you could see them. And this has been an effective way in which we go forward. We divide the work into these 25 different categories, and there's a listing provided. From there, some appear on the state contract, some will go through canvassing and bid responses when we actually have work. But the pre-qualification allows us to be more nimble in the procurement process. So that's an information item. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions on the item? Ira?
Just a brief comment on the pre-qualification. I was at the Metro North meeting, and I mentioned this as a concern about MWDBE on this, because if you pre-qualify firms, maybe you're favoring those, and there's a lot of them, and others you aren't. But they did answer that. I just want, going forward with pre-qualification, we keep our eye on MWDBE when we do have contracts with these firms.
And, we support that very much, and trying to work on additional outreach measures to make sure that we get participation.
And Chairman, Susan Metzger's chair of the committee mentioned you in particular as making great strides and efforts in this area.
Right.
Thank you for that.
And that's just one of my own commitments to try to branch out. We have an action item, and it involves our 2010 proposed budget. We did have the word final, but in light of information that's come to light with regard to our budget and revenues that we anticipated to be available to the MTA for its financial plan, and that may not be available based on the reports of the numbers coming in from the mobility tax. We anticipate there'll be some changes, but we do want to present for your review today, and any questions you have, our budget. Mark's going to take us through a short presentation, again, keeping in mind that we will anticipate that changes get made down the road. If I can ask you to go to
Page 72.
page 72.
Okay.
I think the main point, pending Monday's Finance Committee, this submission from the Long Island Railroad preserves all train service levels and customer service, and allows us to provide those services at a high level of quality and with safety in mind, obviously. Just moving right ahead to page 73. Jerry, you'll handle a few pages, and I'll handle the rest.
Thank you, Mark. The first slide just highlights key aggregate or bottom line information for the Railroad's 2010 proposed budget. More details provided in the charts associated with the staff summary in the book, as well as subsequent slides. This table reflects the expenses and revenue associated with our reimbursable and non-reimbursable budget, essentially the expenses to meet our daily operation, as well as the expenses and revenue associated with projects. So the total expenses for the railroad in 2010, the budget will be $1.4 billion. Revenue, which is fare box revenue and capital reimbursement, is $782 million. small cash adjustment for OFC projects. There's a few programmatic budget adjustments of $4.3 million, and the net cash deficit for the year is projected to be $630 million.
Can I just ask two questions on that page, which I think I know the answer to, but the farebox operating ratio for 2010 is presumed to be?
You know, if you give me a moment after I finish the presentation, I'll double-check that number. I don't have it readily available.
Okay. The second question is the net cash deficit of $630 million,
Correct.
which is cash we don't have.
Right.
That cash comes from the other ways in which MTA raises funds.
That's the MTA subsidy to the agencies,
Right.
correct?
It's the subsidy, so that people who go over the bridges and tunnels pay a portion of that, the 630. The tax collections authorized by the state of New York pay the remainder of the $630 million.
Correct.
So somebody wanting to figure out how much the non-rider pays of the Long Island Railroad budget, that is the number.
Correct.
$630 million. Based upon a expense of $1.4 million.
$1 billion, correct.
Billion.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll get you that the farebox operating ratio in a moment.
Okay. Because that's a in the context of discussions for people who want to see what the purpose of the subsidies are, that is what it is.
Correct.
For the railroad. So the people of Long Island who are paying the subsidies, a portion of the subsidies, understand that that's where the money is going.
Correct.
Okay.
Which, historically, people will remember is why transportation is not generally a private sector function any longer. It's not profitable for capitalism to engage in public transportation. Right.
Right. Or run it. In that context. Right. Yes.
Shifting to this next slide, illustrates the railroad's budget for 2010 in terms of category and by department. These allocations are very similar and consistent over the years. Just real quick, on the category side, 73% of our budget goes toward labor expenses, 27% goes to non-labor, and in terms of by department, almost 70% of the budget goes toward the four main operating departments, engineering, equipment, transportation, and passenger services. The next slide illustrates the railroad's headcount for 2010. And again, these levels, the allocations are pretty similar to prior years. 85% of the headcount is associated with the four main operating departments. The year-end headcount indicated here of 6,829 is slightly above our current actual headcount, only 57 positions above the current actual headcount. Shifting to revenue on the subsequent slide, total revenue, as I mentioned, for 2010 will be $782 million. The largest piece of that is farebox revenue of $529 million. That's 3% above the 2009 year-end forecast for 2009. That's due in part to the fact that the fare increase in 2009 was not a full year amount, whereas in 2010 it's annualized.
And Jerry, if I'm not mistaken, the ridership, though, we've projected to decline by 1.5%.
That's correct. The projection for 2010 ridership is a slight further reduction over the 2009 level by 1.5%. Shifting to the next slide, we compare some of the categories quickly against the 2009 final forecast. Payroll has a slight increase in 2010 versus 2009. That's due to a combination of budget adjustments for cost of living. However, the average headcount with the full implementation of the some of the prior reductions, the average headcount actually drops a little bit in 2010, and so that's bringing down the payroll costs a little bit. Overtime is projected to come down a little bit versus 2009. 2009 we had some severe winter storms, and we tend to budget for a 5-year average. The other factor is in overtime is that we generally budget for what's called open jobs as a straight time coverage in terms of the head count, and then we cover any sort of vacancies on overtime. So we don't want to double budget for those positions.
I would add there, as an aside, that on the just administrative side, as a management perspective, we've had success making more efficient use of staffing, and we've reduced hours worked in 2009 compared to 2008 on the overtime side by about 6%. That's something we've worked hard on.
The last two items I'll just point out would be materials and supplies. That's going up by 12%. It's due to baseline inflation adjustments, slight uptick in running repair material for the fleet as it begins to age a little bit, and just the timing for certain computer equipment being shifted from 2009 to 2010. Likewise, under the purchase services, there's a baseline inflation adjustment. Certain initiatives were adjusted from 2009 to 2010, which lowers 2009 and increases 2010. Also, 2010 reflects opening up and shifting to Art Street, occupying the Art Street facility, so there are certain contracts associated with that for HVAC. And lastly, it reflects decreased funding for vegetation and tree trimming to make sure that we're on the right cycle to maintain the vegetation along the right-of-way. And I think Mark will pick it up from here.
Yeah, and then the final two slides I'll take. I noticed that in the MTA finance presentation, they had noted the growth rates on controllable versus non-controllable expenses. So we did do that for the Long Island Railroad, use the same methodology that the MTA uses. And as you can see, on the area of our budget that we control, we're actually would show a decline between 2010 and 2009 of 1% in expenditures. And most of that is related to straight time and overtime, particularly staffing levels are going down between the 2 years, and that will enable us to produce some savings there. The uncontrollable expenses, as you see, go up at a much higher rate, 8.7%. That's primarily due to fuel, 26% increase, traction power of 8%. And health insurance costs are going up by 7% compared to the year before. And finally, we did just want to highlight some of the programmatic changes in the proposal. We are adding $2 million to our budget on an annual basis to increase our vegetation management and tree trimming efforts. That would put us on a 7-year cycle throughout the right-of-way, and we would be able to address about 60 miles per year of vegetation management. As Jerry mentioned, we have some additional costs to occupy Art Street, which we'll be moving into shortly. There's some increased on the accrued side. We anticipate we will be using more M7 parts and inventory that we've already purchased, so that shows up in the accrued budget as an additional expense compared to 2009 of $7 million. And lastly, there was a small reduction due to deferring the GPS initiative for the diesel and M3 fleets. But those are as I said, there weren't major programmatic changes in this proposal, and those were the major ones.
I am going to just note on the deferring the GPS for the C3s and M3 fleets. We're deferring that because we're, of course, in the process of examining requirements for PTC. I did want to take one moment and, again, commissioners, I know you're familiar with this, but, if you were to ask me about risks in our budget, aside from the risk, with regard to the MTA subsidy number and the fact that the MTA's, revenues may not come in at the projected level for the payroll mobility tax, the other risk, which I know you're aware of, but you can see our budget is structured in reimbursable and non-reimbursable expenses. The reimbursable expenses are those employees who are reimbursed by capital funds because they're performing work in conjunction with the capital program. And while we have sufficient carryover funds in the 0509 program, to continue the work and to continue the reimbursement for those employee expenses, we of course track that very carefully as time progresses to ensure that we have adequate funds to reimburse those employee costs with existing capital program dollars. So we'll continue to report on that as we monitor progress on getting an approved capital program. If you have any other questions, we'd be delighted to answer those.
Any questions?
Is there any estimate about what would be the Long Island Railroad's portion of the $143 million hit from the legislature, or even the potential for the $200 million lack of subsidy, lack of the mobility tax?
We actually aren't on the shares issue yet, but I think by next week, some of those numbers will start to emerge. And I do think, there'll be an effort, to look at across the board type savings as well as individual agency savings.
Okay.
Well, the work that we have done, that you have done on the diesel fleet, there's no change in that in the 010 budget in that context?
No, we are going to continue to aggressively work on the maintenance programs with regard to the diesel fleet.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in answer to your earlier question, the fare box operating ratio for 2010 is 43.8%, so pretty much in line with prior years.
Okay. So the context of this month's over 50% is an anomaly.
Yes, we had to go back to 2005 and find other months where we went over 50%.
Okay.
It's partially the timing of expenses,
Sure.
and then next year, obviously, you have various cost growth, and there's no fare increase to match that.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so with that, we would ask
Any other questions on
approve.
moving the 2010 budget to finance for their review? All in favor? Aye? Okay.
Okay, and with that, we're going to turn to our procurement package. I do have one change to the package. We are withdrawing the Lorem non-competitive procurement, which is on page 88 of your book. From this month's agenda, we may be back to you on that one. We were advised by Metro North that they had a contract matter pending with Lorem. We would like to see that resolved before we move forward. So with that, there are 7 procurements in this month's package, totaling $18.5 million. There are 5 items now in the non-competitive section, totaling $13 million, and 3 items in the competitive section, totaling $5.5 million. We ask for a vote on the non-competitive procurements.
Any questions? Second, any questions on the procurements? And I see we're putting up more signs or monitors.
Yes.
I like monitors. The more monitors, the better. It makes people know where to go and when to go in those contexts. So that's very helpful. That's what the customer wants. Any other questions on these matters? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
In the competitive section, we do have one contract. It's a request to modify the contract with American Occupational Health that I wanted to draw your attention to. We're extending the period of performance for an additional 12 months and adding funding to cover that period. Take Care currently operates and manages on-site and off-site medical services and facilities for Long Island Railroad, Metro North, headquarters, Long Island Bus, and MTA Bus. The modification is required in order to provide Long Island Bus and MTA Bus time to assess their options with regard to perhaps using a different method for services. The remaining participating agencies will then proceed with a multi-agency joint procurement for these services during the extension period so that a new contract can be put in place for January 2011. So with that, we ask for a vote on the competitive procurement.
Motion to approve.
I move them.
Second. Any questions on any of the competitive procurements? If not, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
And there are no ratifications this month, and that completes our report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? If anybody has? Okay, well, we wish everyone a happy holiday season. And for those of you interested in finances, you can come Monday and see what happens to this budget and lots of others at the same time. And Wednesday for the same thing. Motion to adjourn? Oh, thank you very much.